This preliminary hearing will last approximately 3 to 5 days, at which point we will be seeking to hold David to answer for 3 felony counts of which he has been charged.
A criminalist takes the stand. She's not there to talk about a body. Not yet. She's there to talk about a smell. She tells the court she processed a Tesla the day after it was pulled from a tow yard. She describes what she found inside. 11 air fresheners at least. Febreze. Purell. Some tucked into the center console. Others wedged into the rear door pockets. One more sitting in the front trunk. A photo goes up on the screen. It's almost nothing. A small plastic pod, the kind you'd clip to a car vent and forget about. Except this one isn't clipped to anything. It's resting against something else. Something the camera doesn't quite let you see yet. The criminalist keeps talking. She says that when she opened the car, there was a strong odor. She says, in her professional opinion, it was consistent with a decomposing body. 11 air fresheners, 1 Tesla, and underneath at least one of them, something the court will spend the next several days trying to explain. Before we go further, this case involves the death of a minor, and some of what follows is difficult to hear. The car had been sitting for weeks. Neighbors near a quiet stretch of the Hollywood Hills say it hadn't moved in over a month before someone finally called it in as abandoned. It was towed. It sat at the impound lot for 2 more days. And then the smell got bad enough that an employee called the police. When officers opened the front trunk, they found 2 bags. One held a torso and a head. The other, underneath it, held 2 arms and 2 legs. The legs severed not once, but twice each. Investigators also noted insect activity inside the trunk. Flies, larvae, a detail that, on its own, sounds almost clinical, but it tells its own timeline, one that measures out how long she had been there before anyone looked. The remains were badly decomposed. The medical examiner would later say dental records were needed just to confirm who she was. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old, and by the time anyone opened that trunk, she had already been missing, on and off, for more than a year. There isn't a gentle way to describe what the detective found that day, so the court didn't try to soften it. He testified plainly. 2 bags. A body broken down and packed away like something meant to disappear. The car had been registered to a 21-year-old singer, known to millions of fans by a single stylized name. His legal name is David Anthony Burke. He is the one currently facing a preliminary hearing for her murder. A hearing to determine whether there's enough evidence to send this to trial, not a verdict, and not yet a jury. He has pleaded not guilty. He is being held without bail. Cameras weren't allowed inside for most of it, so what the public knows about how Burke has actually behaved in that room comes from the people who were there. He sits at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the waist and legs. His hands occasionally freed so he can take notes. Witnesses describe him as calm, not defiant, not visibly distressed, just still. When the most graphic photographs were shown, the ones of Celeste's remains as they were found in the trunk, observers say he barely reacted, resting his chin on his hand, studying the exhibits the way anyone might study something unrelated to them. Her family sat only a few rows away, close enough to watch him not react while they did. At one point, when a childhood photo from her passport ID went up on the screen, her mother had to be fanned by someone nearby because it looked like she might faint. Their attorney told reporters outside that much of what came out during the hearing was new even to them. Years of alleged evidence surfacing for the first time in a public courtroom. To understand how the court got here, it helps to go back further, to more than a year before anyone found that trunk. In February of 2024, a deputy responded to Burke's Hollywood Hills home for a welfare check. Riverside County had called, asking local officers to see if a missing teenager might be there. The deputy asked Burke how he knew her and when he'd last seen her. Burke said they'd met online through a chat platform back in 2021. He said the last time he'd seen her was in 2023. He said she'd told him she was 18. Body-worn camera footage from that visit was shown in court. The deputy holding up a missing persons flyer with Celeste's photo on it, right in front of the man prosecutors now say had been hiding her presence in his life for years. At the time, the deputy had no reason to push harder. He left. The welfare check ended there. It would be more than a year and a half before anyone connected the dots. Looking back at it now, with everything the court has since heard, that visit reads differently. A missing child's photo, held up in front of the person prosecutors say already knew exactly where she was. Investigators noticed something during Burke's booking photos. A tattoo faded on his left ring finger. It spelled out a name, Celeste. On his right index finger, another tattoo, 2 letters and 3 dots, arranged to spell out a single word, Shhh. Then came the detail that made the courtroom go still. Celeste had the same tattoos, his name inked onto her left ring finger, and on her right index finger, in matching style, the word Shh. Her mother had identified those tattoos before. So had the medical examiner. Prosecutors allege that after Celeste was killed, 2 of her fingers were removed. Her pinky and the ring finger, the one that carried his name. If that allegation is true, it wasn't a random act of violence. It was an edit. Something meant to erase a specific piece of evidence, a specific proof that these 2 people knew each other in a way neither of them was supposed to admit. Investigators say the clearest picture of the relationship doesn't come from tattoos or testimony. It comes from his own phone. Prosecutors allege they recovered years of messages between Burke and Celeste, stored in his cloud backups. Conversations, they say, document a sexual relationship, a pregnancy scare, and discussions about how to handle it. Investigators also say they found explicit images stored on the same device. But the messages that seem to matter most to this case are the ones from the night prosecutors believe she died. According to testimony, Celeste became upset that night and threatened to tell people about the relationship, to end it publicly, on her terms, before he could control the story. What happened next, prosecutors allege, is where the cover-up began. They say Burke ordered her an Uber that night, not to take her somewhere, but to build a paper trail suggesting she'd left on her own, and they allege that afterward, once she was already dead, he kept texting her phone, asking where she was, asking if she was okay. Messages sent to a phone that, if prosecutors are right, could no longer answer. Investigators also point to her clothing, recovered later and examined for physical evidence. A forensic witness testified in detail about its condition, and prosecutors showed photographs of the garments to the court. Testimony the family sat through without leaving the room, even when given the option to step out. The relationship the prosecution describes didn't stay confined to one city, or even one state. According to court filings, the 2 spent what prosecutors call a significant amount of time together throughout 2024. They allege Burke flew her to Las Vegas, to London, to Texas, that he introduced her to his family as though she were simply someone he was dating. not a child, not someone whose age put every part of that relationship outside the law. By November of 2024, the relationship had reportedly ended. Prosecutors say the messages from that period show jealousy on her side, tied to other women in his life, and say he'd allowed her to believe there was a future between them regardless. None of this happened in isolation, and none of it happened quickly. If the state's version is accurate, it was a relationship built and maintained over years, hidden in plain sight behind welfare checks that went nowhere, and a public image that never once suggested any of this. It's worth sitting with how ordinary the surrounding details sound: family introductions, travel, the small mundane texture of a relationship. Except every part of it was happening between an adult in the early years of a music career and a child who, according to prosecutors, wasn't even the age she'd claimed to be when a deputy first knocked on his door. There's a reason prosecutors keep returning to timing. Financial records entered into evidence sketch the shape of what Burke had to lose. In 2022, he signed with a major label and its imprint, receiving an advance in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The payments grew from there. Multiple millions in a single year at the peak. A finance witness estimated his total gross earnings between 2023 and 2025 at somewhere around $10 to $12 million. Prosecutors allege that the threat Celeste made that final night landed at the worst possible moment for him, the same week his debut album was released. At the end of 2025, the label cut him loose entirely. He was paid nothing in 2026. Whether a jury will ever hear that theory laid out in full depends on what happens in the weeks ahead. For now, it's an allegation, built one financial record at a time, sitting alongside a motive prosecutors say was simple. Protect a career that was about to take off from a truth that could have ended it. Investigators say they traced a string of purchases back to Burke in the months before and after Celeste's death. Cadaver bags, heavy-duty laundry bags, a shovel, a fireproof mat, and 2 chainsaws ordered online, allegedly under names that weren't his own. Only one of those 2 chainsaws was ever recovered. Taken individually, almost any one of these items has an innocent explanation. Taken together, prosecutors argue they tell a different story, a list built not for a single moment of violence, but for what comes after it, for containment, for cleanup, for making a body small enough and quiet enough to sit undiscovered in the front of a car for the better part of a year. The court also heard that the purchases were spread out, not made in a single order, and allegedly routed through names other than his own. A detail prosecutors say points to planning rather than panic. Whether the defense can offer an innocent explanation for 2 chainsaws and a fireproof mat is one of the questions this hearing is meant to test. The investigation didn't stop at the Tesla. It moved to the house, a rented Hollywood Hills home, garage included, the same garage prosecutors now allege was the actual scene of the dismemberment. A second criminalist testified to what she found there: stains on the rubber floor mats, slits in the rubber, the kind she said were consistent with a sharp object being dragged or pressed through it. She also examined a blue inflatable pool stored in that same garage. To test for blood, she used a chemical called Blue Star, a reagent that reacts to the iron in hemoglobin and glows blue under the right conditions. Photographs shown in court depict that reaction, the mats, glowing. It's worth saying plainly, a Blue Star reaction isn't proof of blood on its own. Certain other substances, bleach among them, can trigger the same glow. That's exactly the kind of gap the defense has been pushing on, question after question. Which surfaces got swabbed for DNA? Which ones didn't? Who was wearing gloves and when? But there's a detail that's harder to explain away. Investigators say fragments recovered from Celeste's body were matched to torn or missing pieces of that same blue pool. A physical link between the garage and the remains that doesn't depend on a chemical reagent or a judgment call about swabbing technique. Fabric and plastic either match or they don't. According to the testimony, these did. There's a piece of this case that doesn't sit neatly next to the others. It happened months after Celeste died, months after her body was found, and it happened nowhere near Los Angeles. In January of this year, a transit worker was clearing debris along a highway in Santa Barbara County, about 100 miles north of where all of this began. Tangled in that debris was a small plastic card, a passport ID Celeste's. It had been issued back in 2022 when she was 11 years old. Her photo on it still shows a child, years younger than the 14-year-old, whose remains had already been found in a Tesla's front trunk months before this card ever turned up on the side of a road. Prosecutors say the timing isn't coincidental. Cell phone records, they argue, place Burke's phone traveling in unison with the Tesla toward that same remote stretch of Santa Barbara. The two devices moving together, step for step, through the period investigators believe the passport was discarded. That corroboration answers one question and opens another. If the phone and the car really did travel together, it strengthens the case that Burke made that drive himself. But it doesn't explain why the passport was kept at all. Why carry a dead child's identification for months, only to lose it or leave it on a stretch of highway 100 miles from everything else? It's the kind of detail that doesn't resolve. It just sits there, unexplained, while the rest of the case moves forward around it. This is still a preliminary hearing. There's no jury in that room. A judge is weighing whether prosecutors have shown enough for the case to move to trial, not whether Burke is guilty, not yet. Prosecutors have said they expect to call around 10 witnesses in total, including officers, criminalists, and members of the coroner's office, with the medical examiner among the last to testify. Outside the courthouse, the district attorney told reporters that what's being shown at this hearing is only a portion of the evidence, that prosecutors are holding material back, saving it for trial itself. If that's true, the picture presented so far, as disturbing as it already is, may not be the complete one. The hearing itself was expected to run somewhere between 3 and 5 days. By the time testimony reached its final stretch, the court had already heard from officers, criminalists, financial witnesses, a CHP officer, and forensic examiners. Each adding one more piece to a timeline prosecutors say stretches back years before anyone knew Celeste's name. Burke has pleaded not guilty to every charge, including first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and the mutilation of her remains. Special circumstances attached to the case mean that if he's ultimately convicted, he could face life without parole, or worse. His defense has spent much of this hearing chipping at the edges of the physical evidence. Surfaces that weren't tested, gloves that weren't worn consistently, gaps that could, in theory, open room for doubt later. Whether that strategy holds is a question for another hearing, another set of testimony, likely months from now. A process that, by design, moves slower than any single headline about it. It's easy, in a case built on forensic detail, air fresheners, chainsaws, a chemical reagent glowing blue, to lose the person all of it is actually about. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 14. She'd been reported missing more than once before anyone found her. A deputy had stood in front of the man now charged with her murder, holding up her photo more than a year before anyone knew what had actually happened to her. Her mother sat in the front row of that courtroom through nearly all of it, through photographs no parent should ever have to look at. through testimony about her daughter's hands. Whatever the court ultimately decides about the man on trial, none of it changes who she was before any of this happened. A teenager with a name and a life that were hers, not evidence. Long before any of this became testimony, she was a kid from a Riverside County town, the kind of place where a missing persons flyer gets handed out door to door and mostly forgotten within a year. She was somebody's daughter first. Everything else, the tattoos, the passport, the 11 air fresheners, only exists because someone decided her disappearance could be managed instead of answered for. The court will spend months, maybe longer, deciding whether that's exactly what happened. But her story doesn't start there, and it shouldn't end there either. This video discussed the death of a minor, and details some viewers may find disturbing. If any of this affected you, please take care of yourself and consider stepping away from the topic for a while. If you want to see more cases covered this carefully, the best way to support that is simple. Please subscribe to this channel.